like a sister might post a sunset and you might like it. All right, harmless to some person, to someone else it's a sign of flirtation. Like replying to stories with like laughing emojis to a girl you don't know, or even a girl you do know. You don't need to do that, bro. Like, take it easy. Do you know what I mean? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, brothers and sisters, to a live After Maghrib Podcast. It's been a long time coming, and we haven't sat down and recorded for a really long time. Sayed, how are you doing?
I'm well now that you're next to me. Yeah. No, as we've been busy at work and things, even with like After Maghrib behind the scenes, we've done so much, changing studios, upgrading set, trying to work out a new format, how to improve season 3, because that's what we're doing shortly, starting soon, inshallah. But we've also been to Canada, Vancouver. Yeah. So we've met, we've crossed the pond and we've met an entire amazing community that I, felt like they embraced us. And it was amazing to see an audience there. Yeah, and for me, I feel like I really missed you being there. I genuinely say it when I say that. Yeah. And I wish you were there with me.
Habibi. It's been a long time since I was in AbSoc. Were you ever in AbSoc?
Just to recite.
Yeah, you got, for those who don't know, should we get a little sample?
No.
Should we get I need to recite a sample? Yeah, come on, bro.
Towards the end.
Yeah, we'll do it. Okay, yeah. He's got too much prep time now. But AbSoc for me was like a big part of my life. But you were never part of an AbSoc?
No.
Have you ever been in something similar, like a youth group or?
The reason why I say no, and I think this might shock a lot of people here, is that I don't discourage anyone from going to university. I never went uni.
Okay.
You never knew that?
No.
You don't know me well enough.
Is that like a choice of yours?
I think it was a choice back then. But for me, just before I started like this whole higher education and going to university and things, I lost my father. Yeah. So I think that played a role into the responsibilities I had at home. Yeah. And me trying to not say replacing the void of my father being at home, but I felt like I had other duties than to, chase the education that people are chasing. But subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened me different doors.
And he would be immensely proud of you, bro.
Yeah.
You can see what
Inshallah,
you do. How do you feel like that affected the relationship that you had with your friends, the relationship you had with your family at home, kind of at that time? Obviously, because you lost your dad when you were 15, but then it affected you for years after as well.
It did, and I think possibly it still does, but I think what it did, it sort of allowed me to embrace the real world humbly, like from a different perspective entirely. I won't say I missed out on teenage years. I won't say I missed out, being 16, 15, 17, losing out, everyone's having fun in. No, in fact, I think it was like I was prepared for real life. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't want to give too much details.
No,
I think some things are personal.
I'm trying to think about AbSoc, the days where we used to buy refreshments like fruit shoots and crisps.
Yeah. But apart from that, I come to AbSoc to recite.
So. Got a lot deeper. No, but you've done a lot of work, kind of youth work and whatnot. And I think, I hope we're not too old, but we've maybe got a few more years in us. And I think, especially for me, when I started AbSoc, it was in 2013 when I started uni. I went to Aston. Big up. Anyone here from Aston? Yeah. That's my boy. So that was the most. I was telling my wife on the way here that the most shaping experience for me as a character, as an individual to this day was AbSoc. 100%.
You were president, right?
I was president, and I had a fantastic team with me, and I come from a very heavy Shia community, and surrounded by really, really ultra Muslim people. But regardless, I feel like if I went to a university which didn't have an AbSoc, I wouldn't be sat next to you today. 100%.
Why is AbSoc important? Is it more like an identity or belonging?
The day I moved into uni, I remember the day I moved into uni, it was a weird experience. I was the first one in my family to move out at uni, and I was embraced by those who were already in the AbSoc, who came to meet me in Freshers Week and kind of took me in. And I was a completely different person pre-uni. So I was involved in the wrong groups, very, very bad habits, doing things I completely shouldn't be doing. And I think my introduction to AbSoc changed the way I saw Islam generally, relationships with people my age, and really to actually have friends who are Shia.
So would you say AbSoc actually helped you, come towards the path of Allah?
Yeah,
or stay in line is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, a big part, the hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, where he says your religion is the one that you take from your companions. Okay. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast, that you are a product of those around you. And what is that thing we always say? Like, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, the environment, the sort of people I would hang out with when I finished 6th form versus when I started university was a completely different experience. And then obviously it's character building, right? So everyone and anyone who's been involved in an AbSoc will know the things that you do, the picking up guests from the car parks like Ali Hadi just did for me, or going out to do shopping, or speaking to people in the student unions, having stalls and just passerbys engaging with you, replying to DMs on Instagram for your AbSoc page. These small things that you do character build you, and they prepare you for what's to come in years to come.
Can I ask just one question to you, Ahmed? Since you've been in AbSoc and we are in AbSoc, and mashallah, everyone's part of AbSoc, hopefully, inshallah. What is one thing that you say you can cherish and always remember about your experience as president in AbSoc, from those who are part of the AbSoc?
Like something that I think when I was...
You wasn't just attending, you were actually like taking charge.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it like that, because obviously, like anyone who's involved in the committee now knows it's got to be cohesive, and any organization which runs effectively is based on strong leadership and the core team working equally and everyone pulling their weight. So I think for me, at least, my primary goal when I was in AbSoc was to engage people from different backgrounds, to be beneficial to the community internally, but also to put us on the map. Like, at the end of the day, the Ahlulbayt society should emulate and personify the values of the Ahlulbayt alayhim assalam to university. I mean, Ali Hadi, when we were walking here, was just telling me, where is he? Oh, you're at the back. He was telling me, for example, that Warwick right now are doing Islamophobia month. Yeah? I was thinking, bro, that is crazy, because when I was in uni, we had an AbSoc event on Islamophobia, and the university shut it down because we were told that we're not allowed pro-Palestinian speakers at the time. And I had an argument with the head of university security who said, quote, he said, "What the hell is Islamophobia? What does that mean?" I was like, brother, you are the head of security at a university with 10,000 Muslim students. You're telling me what's Islamophobia? And we took that case to Parliament. We spoke in Parliament about this specific case. And at the time, Prevent, for those who know what Prevent are, the government strategy, was a very big deal at the time. So my personal opinion was that your morals should never be compromised, especially when you're part of the Ahlul Bayt society, especially at a time like now when you've got so much oppression around the world. I see a few brothers wearing kafiyas and wearing the scarves. Like, we should not compromise on our values, and our values are clear as day as per the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam. So that, for me personally, that was something I felt AbSoc allowed me to develop. It helped me back then and my relationship since. It's helped me in my marriage, it's helped me in my work life. I feel it now helps me as a parent, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, we're speaking about navigating relationships today.
Yeah.
And the experiences you just gave, like I was sort of drawing it in my head. I was like, okay, he had the relationship with those around him. He had the relationship with those who run the university. He had the relationship, gathering a team, trying to go to Parliament. You said you took this all the way to Parliament and things. So you truly navigated relationships.
Bro, that's a lot of praise. No, I don't think. I think at the end of the day, it's for us to understand that there's a different responsibility that we play with different people, and being conscious, emotional intelligence plays a big role in our day-to-day lives. So the way you would speak to your parents, I would imagine, would be different to the way you speak to your siblings.
Of course.
And obviously your colleagues at work, your professors at uni, so on and so forth. And a big part of navigating relationships is the preemptiveness of emotional intelligence, preempting the person I'm engaging with now. What sort of tone do I need to engage them with? What knowledge should I be prepared with before I enter a conversation? What sensitivities may arise? Where are there potentials for conflict? And if there is conflict, how do I resolve that? But we're not experts, And you guys have probably been able to tell already, we are wafflers, well, at least especially I am.
I know
so we
I
have
do.
a very special guest with us today, Sister Farzana Hirji Karawali. We'll welcome her with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
For those who don't know, Sister Farzana has been active. Assalamu alaikum. She's been incredibly active in the community now for a number of years. She is currently doing a thesis. I'm not even going to try and name all the terminology.
Dissertation.
There's a dissertation.
It's only masters.
Yeah, only masters. For those who don't know, if you don't mind me asking, kind of your background, your field of work, your expertise, how would you describe your work?
Okay, there's too many elements to it. So by profession, I'm a learning disabilities nurse and a registered social worker as well. I deal with people with mental health and learning disabilities. I set up Inspirational Minds, if you remember, at Hood at Stanmore. I've been training communities around the world to set up similar services, and currently doing my master's in neuroscience and psychology and mental health. So that's me.
Okay. How many of those words do you understand?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention my own work, my own personal work.
Please do.
So Farzana Inspires, as I was introduced as, Farzana Inspires Wellbeing is my kind of name that I put up on Instagram, but it seemed to go around quite a bit. So I actually run training programs for safeguarding, mental health, and quite a few others. Nur Relief were the last lot that I trained a few months ago. So I recognized one of the faces on the video. So as well as training, I do coaching, therapeutic work, run events and things like that.
So for those who are not like in psychology or the field of psychology generally, can I like ask a really blunt question? How is the work you do relevant to someone who's studying in university, law or finance or whatever it might be?
I think it's an all-rounded thing because it's about you as a person, as an individual. It's about personal development. It's about, do you understand who you are? And just listening to you guys talking about university and your times, well, yourself talking about university, but also how you've grown from the time when your father passed away. So, growth throughout life. But if we can try and kind of reflect on our growth a lot earlier in our life, it will set us up a lot stronger for future mishaps or adversities that may come around, and we can bounce back a lot quicker. And at the moment we're finding mental health rates are going through the roof. So I think the one key thing we really need to think about is looking at ourselves, developing ourselves personally, which then helps us emotionally as well. So yeah, it's definitely relevant for all university students. I mean, I've started working with kids from the age of 4 now. Obviously, we've had a lot of issues around identity that have come to light that we've never really considered before. So working with, and you've got a little one, haven't you?
Yeah, just running around in Spider-Man.
Yeah, so I've started working with even kids as young as 4 to help develop their identity and just so that there's a bit more resilience.
Okay. It's nice to know your background because I'll be very honest, it was my first time actually hear about the work that you do, apart from seeing it on Instagram and everything, but in person. So it's a blessing to be here beside you because I think you're going to add a huge amount of value to the conversation we're going to have. And I think we should kickstart off the conversation here, relationships. I think everyone has their own definition of what's a relationship, what's a friendship, does it have meaning to them, what sort of relationship should they keep, should they follow, should they aspire to be in. But I think, there's a lot of categories that comes here. You've got, for example, relationships with parents. You have relationship with siblings. You have relationship at the workplace. You have relationship with fellow students. You have relationships even between the team at After Maghrib. What ways can I say, like from your background, helps make a strong bonded relationship work well? Like how can me and Ahmed improve our chemistry?
I think, again, it comes back to understanding yourself before you try to understand the other. What are your values? What are your boundaries? Where are you going to draw the line? What are his values? He has to hold. And you have to respect each other, respect each other's values. These are things that I hold dear to me, and I understand that these are things that you hold dear to you. That way you know where you both stand. And so there's no issues in your relationship. Does that make sense? And
Do
you
you
learn to communicate.
Do you have to respect the other person's values or respect their right to have values? So, for example,
Both.
I might disagree with your values, with the greatest respect, or someone else's values. And I was having a conversation today about, for example, and do you know what? Just to make it kind of semi-interactive, I'm going to ask the audience a question, and I want you guys to close your eyes and raise your hand, whether you agree or disagree. All good, yeah? And the reason why I want to do this is because I have a feeling it's going to be like a bit of a split. Okay? When it comes to relationships, are you entitled to cut someone off? Close your eyes, guys. Are you entitled to cut someone off if they have had a lack of response, for example, on the Palestinian issue? If you feel it's okay to cut someone off if they've done nothing or spoken nothing at all about Palestine, if it's okay to cut them off, raise your hand. That's interesting. All right, you guys can open your eyes.
Someone said a bit more detail.
Sorry?
More detail to the question.
Like, for example, like you mentioned, for example, Farzana, about respecting people's values. I feel like that's very important in terms of I respect someone's right to have an opinion. But, for example, I may disagree with someone's opinion, and for argument's sake, you see now with everything that's happening, there are people who are intentionally remaining quiet, or people who are preferring to remain speaking about it from a distance, or not at all, based on comfort, and not jeopardizing their own status and reputation and their own profile. So I feel, on a personal level, I feel like it's important to choose your circle very wisely, and to navigate your relationships with people also based on your values and based on theirs as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe if that's harsh, but I think that's quite an interesting conversation to have.
So one word that comes to mind is judgment, and that's something we do very quickly when we look at somebody. We make a judgment or have an opinion about what they might be thinking or doing without even having a conversation with them.
Right. So we assume things.
We assume, and that's something that really has an impact on relationships. But even here, with the question that you've asked, in some ways we're making a judgment. Now, I'll be honest, in this case at the moment, I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with a team of people that I've been training in Palestine, but I haven't been outwardly. Most outwardly is what I put on my stories.
Sure.
But I don't have to tell people that. Does that make sense? And I would hope that nobody would have a judgment because they don't know the kind of work I do behind. Does that make sense? So judgment is one thing that we really need to take on board in terms of any form of relationship.
I think, instead of judgment and assuming things, I think if we really you didn't share your side, by the way, whether you would cut someone out or not. What would you do?
Again, I was like, it's a great answer. I think it really depends on who it is. I don't think I would, but I think it would. I think my respect for someone would go up a lot if I saw them openly condemning acts of oppression. So, for example, I have colleagues at work who are completely passive. I had a colleague today tell me at work he would have marched for Palestine before October the 7th, but not after. I was like, okay, that's interesting, bro.
Okay.
But anyway, whatever. My point being is with that guy, I'm not going to cut him off, but the picture you draw of someone.
I think there needs to be encouragement.
Right, or just generally better information or knowledge and awareness, and being having the knowledge on how to talk about this issue with people and with different types of people who have different levels of understanding. But in terms of as a relationship, personally, I don't think I would cut someone off, but I think I would. I think it would paint a picture to me, obviously after having a conversation with someone.
I don't think I'll cut anyone off.
Yeah.
Unless I think they go against Islamic values, I think they're entitled to have, whatever opinion they want to have, whatever stance they want to take, whether they want to share something or not. I genuinely don't see it as a big deal if you share or you don't share. If you do, you've helped the cause. If you don't, eventually, inshallah, you will. But I don't think we should come and take this path where we force people, or we look down on them, or we start judging them, telling them, you don't stand on the path of haqq. Because I see it a lot, especially, I'll be honest, in the Shia community, there's a huge talk now. There's a balance. Do we support Palestine fully, or do we not talk at all?
Are you Husseini or Yazidi?
Yeah, so there's people are judging,
it's
that's
not like that.
which is absurd, crazy.
But it comes back to this conversation on when you approach someone, how you make the judgment prior, and whether it's important to enter a conversation or a relationship with a prior judgment as well.
So when you do go in with a judgment, it shows on your face. And what's that going to do in your conversation with that person? What would they be thinking about you? However, if you went with full respect and you greeted the person with no judgment, how was that conversation going to happen, and what would happen as a result with that relationship? Be much more open, wouldn't it? That person would then not have reservations about you because of your facial expressions that are reserved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, cool. Right, so I think that's really, really helpful when it comes to peers, especially university, because you're dealing with people here who are kind of within community and also outside of our, when I say community, I mean in terms of Muslim. Something else I want to get into is like the big one, the obvious one, is premarital relations, and also in university, talking to the opposite gender, engaging with the opposite gender. I think I have to be careful what I say because my wife's here. So, but to be very blunt and to be very honest, everyone has spoken to the opposite gender, some more than others. Some, mashallah, Sayed Ali is like one of the good boys. But you get some people who are, you know, really struggling. When I say struggling, I mean they're just talking to girls, for example, like without any reservation, or maybe speaking to multiple girls, or maybe meeting girls, or maybe being in one relationship for a number of years. It might be distant, it might be in university, it may be in AbSoc, it may be D-low, like completely unknown. Or it might just be a case where you have someone who is of this age, so let's say between 18 and 22, who are approaching the age of marriage, thinking about, my parents are talking to me about marriage, and my siblings are talking to me, my boys and my friends are getting married and getting engaged, and the overwhelming question, the looming question is, where do I begin? What do I need to understand about pre-marriage relationships before I get married?
With the opposite gender.
I hope so, yeah.
But I think before you even look there, you first got to look at yourself. Again, it goes back to, what relationship do I have with myself? Do I know myself fully? Because if you don't know yourself, what happens is you look for things in somebody else that will fill the gaps within you, and that becomes a very dependable relationship, and it can be quite suffocating as well. So you really have to first have a relationship with yourself. You have to learn to spend time with yourself, understand yourself, work on yourself. And then automatically you will know the kind of person that needs to be in your life, whether that is friends-wise, because obviously we're talking about all relationships. What kind of friends do you look for? Well, until you understand yourself, you won't know what kind of friends to look for, right? And you end up falling into situations where our friends can take us down a route that may not be the right way for us, you know? So we really have to be open to understanding ourselves. And I think a key to that is reflection. We must reflect. And when I look at relationships, I wanted to bring this up right at the start, though, and I'm changing it up a bit. But we have to go back to the relationship of Bibi Fatima and Imam Ali. And the relationship that they had with their families. Whether that is with the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or whether that is with the children, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Bibi Zainab. You know, what was the beauty within that relationship? How did they respect each other? Each and every one had an identity. And that still comes back to my conversation about identity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so at this stage, Sayed, I don't know if you'd agree or not. So you got, if you don't mind, I'm gonna bait you out here.
My wife's not here.
Your wife's not here. So I can ask you freely. So you got engaged at how old? 20?
19.
19. Yeah. So was that like entering that? Can I have a show of hands, if you guys don't mind me saying? How many of you are engaged or married? Okay, so a good like 5-10% of you. Yeah. So like, okay, fine. So the majority of you guys, would you say that you are like approaching, I don't want to say if you are looking or not, because you don't want to bait yourselves out. Would you say you're approaching the years of looking to get married? Yeah? Okay.
One hope.
Is the pressure on? Is the pressure on?
Would you guys say the pressure, would you feel pressure from community, from societal norms, from your parents? or maybe not even from yourselves, but would you say that you could see people around you feeling the desire or the pressure to get married or engaged? Yeah? Okay, that's interesting. Because what I want to understand is, and a lot of people may ask this question, is there a right age to get engaged? Is there a right state of mind to enter a relationship prior to getting married or getting engaged? Everyone will have a different answer. What do you reckon, Sayed?
If you're asking me, I think I was in a state of mind of being ready to get married. I wouldn't say I was, special or different than everyone else, but I think that was like my goal in life.
It's gangster.
Growing up, even like with my circle of friends, by the way, I'll share a story I had today. I called a friend today who they recently had a baby. God bless them. Baby Lena is the name. I'm sure he'll let me share the name here today. And we haven't spoken in like 2-3 years. And I told him, you know what, Ali, when we were young, when we went to the same school as well, Ali Ahlulbayt, maybe those know him, they don't know him. I was like, you know what, I'm so happy for you, and my heart is so filled with joy that now, alhamdulillah, you did get married a few years ago, but now you actually have a family. And I was like, do you remember the conversations we used to have back in the day?
Yeah.
How we, want to see our future spouses, how we want to raise our children and things like that.
Mashallah.
And I was like, look, it's coming to fruition. But this all started when we were young. And we were in the mindset of, trying to seek pleasure in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from that perspective. So we wasn't really like chasing relationship with like non-mahrams and things like that. I wouldn't say I was involved in that. Did I face it all the time? I went to a mixed school. I wouldn't say it wasn't there, but I knew with myself, if I was ever in that situation, I knew first of all, there's shaitan and there's iman. You have to choose what path you want to take. So I think, firstly, some values at home helped me, think that way. And then, being part of a community, growing up in the community in the center that I went to, these were things that always, I'm not going to say drilled down to us, but explained to us as to why, you can be in certain environments, but you can choose what path to take. You can either take one that takes you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you can take one that takes you towards shaitan wa a'udhu billah. So when I'll share one experience, for example, you may find it funny. I did go sixth form. Yeah, I didn't go uni, but I did finish sixth form, guys. Okay.
Why is that funny?
Huh?
Why is that funny?
Because a lot of people, we have conversations and then, we speak about uni and studies and work and careers, and they say, so what did you study? I'm like, I didn't go uni. They're like, huh? They wasted 20 minutes of their time explaining what they did. When it comes to me, I got no explaining to do. But when I was in sixth form, I had surprisingly, a lot of Muslim friends. And a lot of those friends were friends with the opposite gender. So my circle of friends are fine-tuning with females, for example. But when they used to come and speak with them, they might spot them, they might shake their hands, they might hug them. For me, it was this. And the funny thing about it, and the reason why I say it's funny, is that whenever any female came to approach me or anything, it was always like this. And I was like, I'm a normal human being. You don't need to put your head down.
Ayatollah.
Huh? Yeah. And then someone found out I'm a Sayyid and it went spreading. Like even non-Shia started finding out I'm a Sayyid. Now I'm getting this respect and everything. But I think I chose that respect, and I think because I knew who I was.
But Sage, the majority of us are not like that. Is that fair to say? Like maybe or maybe not.
Don't judge, Ahmed.
I don't want to judge. Sorry. No, but I think like you, mashallah, you're special. And
I wouldn't say I'm special.
No, you were raised in a really good upbringing. Mashallah, your dad was a khatib and a scholar and all of that. So like that obviously had a fantastic impact and fundamental core impact on you. And for some who are like that, fantastic. And even for those who maybe are not, the main thing is that we have a consciousness inside us which tells us we know what is right and wrong, because the recognition of what is halal and haram is the first step in obviously making the right decisions and approaching the right things.
But I just want to finish my point, because everyone thinks I'm an angel. Did I end up shaking hands with some people? Yes, I did. Do I regret it? Yes. But when I went home, I thought to myself, I regret that. Why did I? Yes, I may be in that situation, but then I found out, like, for example, if you are compelled or, you feel embarrassed or something, you can actually, possibly wear a glove or extend your sleeve, and you can do that. So there were certain things that I never knew about because I was just told to stay far away from it. But later on in life, I found out, you can actually work around it. But did I feel guilt? And I think that was very important because sometimes we can do things without feeling guilty, and then I think that's when it becomes a problem.
The guilt
is when the wrong becomes fine, and I think we see this in society today.
Like the desensitization of
that's the word.
It's not a big deal. I'm speaking to a guy.
Yeah.
That should ring alarm bells, right?
But I think a lot of the desensitization that we have in life is starting from a very early age. We let things go slowly. So by the time we're, at this age, it's like you're not listening to your inner self that's telling you, your intuition that's telling you not to do certain things. I mean, I never had the confidence to say no at work before when I was younger, when somebody just pulls their hand out. And if you don't, it looks so rude to them.
It's because we're nice people. I hope to think that's why,
But, and again, that's a relationship at work, right? At the end of the day, how do you hold your relationship at work? Do they value you? So if I was to say at that point, I can't shake your hand, they should respect me too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think I never had the confidence to exert my values and say, these are my values, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have a question for you, if you don't mind. So a lot of the people here we've established are not engaged or married, but are approaching the age of looking to speak to the opposite gender or approaching the age of engagement or whatever. My personal opinion, from personal experience, through learning from experience, recognizing what I did right and wrong, the growth I had pre and post marriage, my personal opinion is that, like, especially for guys, there comes a point, like a clicking point, where we're like, I want to have a family now. I want to be a dad. I want to get married. I want to go on my own. And my dad told me yesterday, actually, he said, you always wanted to get married young. I remember you telling me from young. He told me today or yesterday, I think it was. For guys, I think that comes to us psychologically, physiologically, whatever you want to call it. For men, it just becomes, I'm ready, I'm at an age where provision and protection are now core responsibilities that I want to inherit, basically. But being ready and being wanting to be ready are like two different things. So being ready to be married and the expectations that a sister will have on you as a guy once you get engaged is very different, right? So you can want to be married and want to get engaged and be ready to get engaged. There are two different things. But a question for you, sister, is how will someone know if they are mature enough to enter a relationship or an engagement with the opposite gender? Is there a litmus test? Is there an istikhara or something which I can do which will say to me, you are ready to get engaged and you are mature enough? Or is there no way for us to know?
Oh, that is such a hard one. I'm trying to think back to my days as well. I think you just need to... Sometimes you'll never be ready as well. That's another thing, right?
Very
Even
true.
though you enter a marriage, you're still not going to be ready because you haven't done all the work that you needed to, particularly if it's a young marriage. I got married at the age of 19. I was engaged as well. And I think if you haven't really worked on yourself, with usually, I mean, right now we're at uni, we don't have time for that. Who has time to work on ourselves, I think you are right, you will know, but it's never going to be in stone. You're never going to feel this is the time. I think what's more important is finding the right person and that opportunity and not letting it miss. A lot of people pass by in life that because we're not looking, we lose it. Does that make sense? So there's lots of blessings that come our way generally in life, but if we're not looking, we lose those blessings. And it's the same thing with marriage, I guess, So it's how you're viewing the other party. Are you viewing them as somebody to just have a good time with and hang out with? Or are you actually understanding them as a person?
Because is it fair to say that my wife said something really wise to me when we were on the way here? We were talking about the concept of baggage and kind of trauma, and just even if it's not baggage or trauma, but just what makes you who you are and how it molds you when you are entering a relationship. So for context, my wife is from a different community than I am, and she's from a different country than I am. So she's an American Iraqi, and I'm a British Khoja. So we have two very different world experiences.
So you have the United Nations at home.
Yeah, literally, Switzerland. So we have two different experiences, two different sets of cultures and ambitions. We come from completely different backgrounds, and our family dynamics were completely different. And we met in a similar environment to AbSoc, so Islamic charity work and volunteering and all of that. And for me personally, I think maybe for her, we felt that we connected on an intellectual level, but her maturity, her ambition was what really drove me. So on a personal level as a man, I felt, well, if I'm not ready, I want to be ready for that girl. So I try to force myself to speed up my readiness. Now, for those who are maybe at the age of looking to get married now, and they are maybe speaking to the opposite gender, maybe there's a girl in the AbSoc they're interested in, maybe there's someone from the community, or they've had an introduction from an auntie or an uncle. What would you say are the criteria, if there are any, to look out for or to be aware of? What is important, what will help them when being conscious of their previous baggage and their previous cultures and what's to come as well?
Okay, so baggage is a different thing, and I'll answer that later. Okay. I'll first start with, so when I was listening to your story, even though you were very different and you found things that you liked in her and she found things that she liked in you, the one thing that really joined you together was your values.
Yes,
because you
100%.
both did the same thing and you both believed in what you were doing. Yeah. And that's what till now must be holding your relationship together. Those beliefs and those values that you found in each other, that you did together as a core team, is the same core part of your relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to do. That's why I was saying that work on yourself to understand your values and then look for those values in the other person. Now, beliefs-wise, I mean, if you found somebody with an AbSoc, hopefully you'll have the same beliefs. Yeah. But you also have issues around, you know, who your marja is, for example, right? And I came across sorry?
That's a huge one.
It is a huge one. It is.
From,
and these discussions are not happening beforehand. So at some point, you've got to hit the brakes and actually have the conversations. And I've had relationships that have come to me where it's literally got to the engagement or non stage, okay? All the clothes, everything's come. And then the person's asking, right, we need to do mutta. I don't believe in mutta. Okay, so who's your Ayatollah? I don't have one. Okay, so where's the foundation of that relationship? Do you understand where I'm coming from? How are we going to build? If there is no foundation, how do you build up? If there are no values that are holding the core of if you have a building, you need a foundation. Then you build up from there. You build that relationship off that foundation. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So you have to dig quite deep and have these conversations to understand more about each other. Then you know you're the right. And that's what I'm saying. Even if you're not ready, you both understand where you're not ready, and you can both work together on creating a relationship. Does that make sense?
What would you say criteria is, in your opinion?
I don't know if I can share an actual criteria, but at the end of the day, I think what unites us in this conversation is that firstly, we're all Muslim, alhamdulillah. Well, inshallah, all of us here is today, and we all, aspire to follow the teachings and the Sunnah of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And he says, follow my Sunnah, and if you want to follow my Sunnah, one of the paths is marriage. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we, inshallah, all have this vision, and inshallah, we make this vision a reality where we find that spouse, and we do get married and settle and have a family. Mm-hmm. But it's not as simple as that. I remember the conversations we used to have in our community. It's, for example, just look at his faith and look at his manners. But I believe when we are told, his deen and his akhlaq, I think these are the most basic of things. Mm-hmm. Like, these two must be there. But it's not the only two conditions that you can say, okay, this is, for example, the right person or not the right person. I think there's more to that, because you can't just say, I'm ready for marriage. No, it's not just physical, it's emotional, it's psychological. And, speaking about baggage, what I've experienced from friends I have and community members and even conversations that we have is that sometimes you get into a marriage, you think you're ready, but you've actually come with baggage. I don't know, I might go into your point here or not, but the lighter you are, I think you grow together. Yeah, exactly. You're sort of on this path and journey together.
Did you say the lighter you are?
The lighter your baggage.
Okay.
When you don't have, for example, I'm going to use blunt examples. Like, you can be rude, and the other person is not rude. Who has the heavier baggage? You can be someone who's merciful, and the other person has no character, and no rahmah, and no mawaddah, none of this. That brings nothing but destruction in a relationship. And nowadays, if we actually look at it, the way I've seen it, society nowadays has expectations of what a marriage should entail or should have.
Yeah.
And sadly, it doesn't match Islamic values.
Yeah.
Yani when our core entrance into a marriage is Islam as our core main basis, we can't take this modern society of what we should expect in a marriage. So we should go in knowing that we should have, for example, a door of mercy and rahmah open for each other, a door of communication. And I don't want to say friends, I don't know who's going to end up listening to this. A lot of people are going to start questioning my friends. But a lot of my friends have an issue with communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned cutting out, you bring the example of, cutting out someone else who doesn't speak for Palestine, for example.
Yeah.
No, I know people who cut out their wife because they don't know how to communicate. Like their community just shut down and not speak for a month or two, and then that wife goes to complain to her parents, and the parent comes, speaks to his dad, what's going on? You couldn't just say, okay, let's sit down and have a talk.
No, you have to have rahmah. You have to have mercy.
Yeah, so I don't know if there should be like training in our community, or I think our parents should do a better job at this. I don't want to blame mothers or fathers on the way of how they get their children ready, but when I was told about marriage, I was never told, for example, okay, you have to have this certain degree, or you have to have this certain amount of money in your bank account, or you have to have some certain profession where it gives you this X amount of money where you can live this sort of lifestyle. I wasn't told that. I was told, build a family, strive in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you do it together. And I think the younger you are, I think it's better when you ride that boat together, because you sail.
I think that's really cool.
I didn't go into too much detail.
Yeah.
But because I don't want to share too much things from my personal
But there's
life.
an element of utopianism there, where you will feel like part of me agrees. But I say 90% of what you say I completely agree with. So getting married young is so important because you're both still on a journey. You're molding. You're developing into your own characters. You are still learning yourselves, and also you can show rahmah and mercy to the other. And we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, chapter 30, verse 21, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and of his signs is that he created you yourself mates, that you may find tranquility in them, and he placed between you affection and rahmah and mercy. Indeed, these are the signs of the people who give thought, who have reflection. Obviously, there's other things. Surah Al-Imran, verse number 14, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The enjoyment of worldly desires, women, children, treasures of gold and silver, fine horses, cattle, and fertile land has been made appealing to the people. These are the pleasures of this worldly life, but with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the final destination. Allah says in the Holy Quran himself that, you find pleasure in money and your spouse and all of that, but ultimately God is the ultimate entity in that relationship. And we were always told prior to marriage, or at least I remember being told, that marriage is triangular. Yeah. It's a symbiotic relationship between a husband and wife and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the middle of that has to be God. And the values are so important there. Because if you share values at a premarital stage, the chances are you will share values at a postmarital stage. And at a time where you are raising children and where you are, faced with a world crisis, is this girl going to back you if war breaks out, for example? Or if the horde of the Imam comes and
she's got your back, don't worry. She's got your back, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. Hope so. On a level, like for example, if you want to pursue Islamic studies, if your child is having an issue with school, morally, are you on the same page? Islamically, are you on the same page? And also socially, what sort of relationships will they have with the people that you care about, and vice versa. So understanding these prior, I know the event is called red flags, but it's more a case of understanding the green flags and how to avoid the red flags. And understanding that there are values that we can look for in the opposite gender, which will go a long way. It's very easy for us to be taken with a tide and, to get drawn into lust based on the aura that the opposite gender gives you. And just really how excited you are to be talking to someone. That a lot of the time is not truthful. It's not truthful to yourself, to your soul. The last thing I want to mention, before I kind of hand it back, and I want to ask you about the baggage thing and kind of toxic relationships as well, is with regards to... I completely forgot what I was going to say. We have a... Yeah. So for the purpose of the recording, how do you ensure that the person you're looking for doesn't have too many, or you're not looking for too many core values and you're not over-constraining? Okay.
The person's human, give them a break, right? I mean, you've got to also be different. If you're going to be the same all the time, life becomes boring and mundane. You're going to have to shake it up a bit, right? So you're going to have to be different. You're going to have the same meal every day, right? So you've got to look for things where you know beforehand that you agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be doing different things. I mean, me and my husband are completely different. So we always agree to disagree. And I think that's the best thing. I think also from the start of a relationship, you have to understand it's not going to be the same as the first day you met that person. Because when a road is being nicely laid, what happens after the rain comes and the snow and then we get potholes and dips and do you know what I mean? You're going to get this the whole time through the marriage. But if that conversation at the beginning is being good and you've really understood each other, and this is why I like what's it called? What do they have at the church when they do their vows?
Vows.
Oh, I love the
vows.
vows. I think we should be having vows, honestly, because that is the promise that we make at the start of our relationship. I think at the time of the nikah, there should be some vows that are shared, or at least you've done that beforehand. So at least you've made a promise to each other right from the start for certain things, right?
Yeah.
And then the rest will come. And one should be communication, definitely. The key should be communication.
I'm just laughing because this conversation we had recently, me and Yasser spoke about this a few days ago, the exact same thing. And the communication, generally speaking, has got to be so critical. I mean, for me personally, I feel like there was a lot of things I could have communicated better, or I could have asked more questions. And understanding ambitions, understanding the essentials and the desirables. Like Abid, you asked about core values. Being a football fan is not a value. To me, it is, because I follow Liverpool. Yeah. I get what you mean, yeah. But like, for example, knowing your essentials and your desirables, and like you said, sister, that self-assessment and knowing who you want to be in years to come is so important. So if I know, for example, in many years, a core value of mine is that I want my children to be heavily involved in in the community, to do community work and charity and philanthropy is really important to me, for example.
But that's for you.
Right. So if that's an important value for me, and I know that, and you're right, like I think there should be a difference, but to be able to communicate that to someone and to assess their response is so important.
Yeah,
and to actually put that forward prior to offering, a hand in marriage is really important. To make yourself vocal, and also to give the chance to someone else to be vocal as well.
So if I can just pick up off that, for example, in our traditional, things are different now, but traditionally when we kind of got married, or I'm a lot older than you guys, so I got married a lot younger. When we got married, we had our values from our parents. Would you agree? Yeah? You have values in a home environment. As a baby, you don't come with anything. You just grab what your dad says, you grab what your mum says, that's your values, and you try going through life, and you get to university and you wonder, hold on a minute, I'm going to add a few more. I don't feel like chucking those out. I'm going to add some more values. And then you become a bit confused. Who the hell am I now? I have no idea. I've got my parents' values, my grandparents, everyone's values. Okay, you haven't gone through that bag or that sack of values to chuck out stuff that really don't sit with you. Out of guilt, you hold on to them. So you're having your own internal issues going on. What do I believe in? What do I really care about? Yeah? Because you care for somebody else.
That's true.
And then you get married, and then your in-laws say, well, this is the way we do things. These are our values. And your husband says, these are my values from my ancestor, my parents, and my whatever. And so you say, okay, well, to keep the marriage, I'm going to take all those too. What happens to you later on down the line when you have taken on the burden of everyone's values?
Yeah.
And don't forget, you're going to throw them on your kids as well when they're born.
You lose your identity as well.
Because you are again going through a
Is there an example you can give? Because I sort of understand the point you're making, but I'm just trying to see what could be like a flag of what could be,
So if you know yourself really truly, and you know what values from your parents that you agree with,
okay,
right? What you want to take with you. Like we've said very clearly today, there's a lot of values our parents have given us that have kept us steadfast in discipline, within religion, within people that we want to be, yeah. Using those values And even when we've been to university, we've picked up other things, or college. We've picked up, I didn't go to university till very, very late as well. We picked up things from other people, from other communities. And we said, I like that. I think that's really good. I'm a social worker and a nurse.
Yeah.
With that, we have a set of values and ethics that we have to follow as a social worker. And as a nurse, we have another, and it's like a book this thick, set of values and ethics we have to follow. So how many of them am I following in one go?
Yeah.
I can't, right?
Yeah.
So we really have to understand what really is, again, it goes back to respect. The ones that we're not going to take on for ourselves, we must respect the other person for their values.
Yeah.
We may not agree, but we're respecting them because they must have thought it through.
Sure.
There are many that don't, but we're not going to go into those conversations. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like, and that can be applied to the stage of like the talking phase, but even in other relationships, other examples as well. And guys, I have to make it like abundantly clear that we have so many gems in our ahadith and the Holy Quran. Sayyid Ali and I talk a lot about Risat al-Huquq by Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. In Risat al-Huquq, you've got dozens of rights and relationships. We know the obvious ones, the right of the body parts and the organs and all that. But beyond that, you have the rights of the traveller, the right of the one sitting with you, the right of the one giving you counsel, the right of the one older, younger, your teacher, your parents. Like any sort of relationships that you engage with in general, the Aimma alayhim salam teach us fundamentally how to engage with someone else. And those core values of communication are embedded in our books. So understanding what we have in Tashayyu' and what we have in our school of thought is so critical. And I cannot stress that enough, because at the moment, guys, if you don't mind me saying, like being as blunt as possible, you guys have got so much time on your hands. You don't pay taxes. You're going to like 2 lectures a day. You're chilling. Use the time on your hands, honest to God. Like use the time on your hands. Try and research as much as possible. And AbSocs, you maybe 2-3 different, like UOB, Cov, whatever, Birmingham, Aston, Warwick, all of the AbSocs, try your fundamental best to just try and be as holistic as possible when it comes to education as well. I know I've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent, but I think it's so important that the Islamic education element is really, really grasped at this age prior to getting married, because you will not have that time. When you guys graduate and you start full-time jobs and you get engaged and then you have kids, and it's just like a long list of about to happens like in the next 5 to 10 years for you guys. So I would use this like opportunity now to the best of your ability. I know I've rambled a bit. Is there any other comments from the audience or anything that you guys want to add before we kind of move on to the last part of the discussion? Yes, sister over there. Did you catch most of that? I think I caught 70.
I catched the first half, and I think you're looking for more context when it comes to, interacting with the opposite gender. Am I right? Okay, I can give an example. I think this might help. Shall I go?
Yeah, go.
Okay, maybe you guys can share after me. I can give my own personal examples. When I was at school, even like starting from year 7 all the way till I finished 6th form, I was always surrounded by the opposite gender, whether they had to sit next to me in class, or whether we had to, share the same dining table in the lunch hall, or whether, it was playtime, or, what they call break time. Sorry, not playtime. That's bracket for my daughter has playtime at school. But when it was break time, like there was always interactions with the opposite gender. That will happen 100%. I think where it becomes tricky, and I think this is where we need to focus on these points, is that there's an interaction where it's beneficial, and there's an interaction where it has no reason for you to have those interactions whatsoever. One example is that you can be talking about your classwork. You might be doing teamwork. You might be, having, an assignment that you need to work with together.
Like the go-to.
I know. Hang on, Zian. So beyond that, salam, how are you? You're well. I personally don't see a problem with that as long as you don't initiate that. You can respond nicely and be respectful and return the salam or the how are you and I'm well and how is you and your family, for example. But I think where you take that to another step is where it becomes dangerous and I think unnecessary. And one example we have as Muslims, and one I had growing up, is that the first interaction you have, which is unnecessary, could be hi. I've used this somewhere in one of our podcasts before. The second time, that conversation can happen again, but this time it's not hi, it's a smile. then that smile can become, something later on which we don't want it to go, can become, leading into an actual relationship, which is haram and outside the bounds of Islam and Sharia, which is where it becomes dangerous. But the moment you can ensure and trust yourself that you keep it at salam, and you keep it at, I'm well, how are you, how's work, let's do this together, no problem. But when it goes outside of this line, I don't know if everyone has their own definition of what's right and what's wrong, but inshallah the majority understand what I'm trying to portray here, and the message that I'm saying is that you should know yourself. If your gut is telling you this conversation is unnecessary to have with the opposite gender, do not have it. Keep it very minimum, keep it respectful, keep it nice, and that's it. Don't go further. Like I've had conversations with the opposite gender, they don't end. The only way to end it is you have to take yourself out of that conversation. I don't want to be rude, but I really have to go. Sometimes you have to do that. You can be nice all you want, but being nice can take half an hour and ultimately result in something you don't want it to result in. So I think everyone needs to use their gut or whatever barometer they have, or what's right and what's wrong, or what's necessary and what's unnecessary, and I think you can do that yourselves.
Can I just come in there and say something that I think might be helpful? So we talked about the triangle, right? To have Allah in our marital relationship, but it's in any relationship, right? Even with the relationship with your parents, with your friends, whoever it may be, because Allah becomes the intermediary to help you to think. And that's why we have niyyah, right? If we are told from a young age, make a niyyah before anything you do, right? It doesn't have to be recite the whole thing and then gurbatan ilallah afterwards. It's just in your head, it's a niyyah. Now, if you have a niyyah and an intention of what you're going to achieve from that interaction or from that relationship, that's what will guide you. And a niyyah is what? It's for the sake of Allah. But psychologists have also started talking about intention in the same way as we've been talking about niyyah. For any kind of change in life, you need to first start with an intention. So if you're somebody that falls weak within certain situations, okay, and you can bring that to whatever imagination you want to bring it to, but in that situation, if you have a niyyah, are you seriously going to go wrong? It's going to be your barrier. It's an invisible barrier. You cannot go wrong. So Adil Sistani has said that we can have interactions under the pretext of education. And you guys are here together to learn, right? So there's no reason why you can't interact. But again, the niyyah has to be there. What am I doing with this person? What am I wanting to achieve? If I want to know more about this person and I want to progress this further, there are routes and ways to do that. Does that make sense? And there's no reason why we can't find somebody from places like this. Or, I can just talk about Stanmore, Al-Hadi Youth, Stanmore Jaffrey's, and even you've got Bain as well. I think Bain are also, how many relationships have formed as a result of a clean niyyah of working together, just like yourself and your wife? And there's nothing wrong with that. And in something like that, the barakah of Allah is there. And with that barakah of Allah, nothing will affect your relationship because you've done it in the right way. And that's what we need. We need to start off a relationship in the right way.
I think to add just a slightly bit more context as well. We always hear about, you might be in class, you talk about homework, like Sayed, you said. And I remember when I was in madrasa and when I was young, I used to hear that all the time, like, bro, give me another example, because I was never talking to girls about homework at school, and for me that was not highly applicable. So I'm going to be really honest with you. Really, for our generation or your generation, it's social media, unnecessary likes on posts. Like a sister might post a sunset and you might like it. All right, harmless to some person, to someone else it's a sign of flirtation. Someone might post a selfie on their story. You might like the story and that might give an impression. Just try and avoid it if you can. Trust me, it will save you a world of headaches.
Well, it's the unnecessary. When you avoid the unnecessary, you don't open a can of worms.
So the unnecessary in a face-to-face interaction, that's obvious stuff. Like the unnecessary, so what are you doing after today's lecture? Or after AbSoc, where you that stuff you don't need to do, and we know that. Like in our gut, we'll know what's right and wrong. Yeah. But it's harder to determine that when it comes to social media, like the follows, accepting follow requests, following back, like replying to stories with laughing emojis to a girl you don't know, or even a girl you do know. You don't need to do that, bro. take it easy. Do you know what I mean? So, but we have to be real. How am I ever going to find a wife if I can't talk about anything except homework? Do you know what I mean? So, at the same time, in my humble opinion, and we're not maraja and we're not scholars, so you guys go and do your research. You have enough beautiful and fantastic scholars in your vicinity here. But there are circumstances where you might learn from the opposite gender and they might be educated. For example, we're having a very civil and halal conversation right now with a sister. We're sitting in the same vicinity and we're talking, we're learning from her expertise, and she's not learning from us. It's very one-sided.
No.
But the idea being is that you can pick up, and like I mentioned, at least on a personal level, I was astounded by the girl I ended up marrying because I found her to be just a genius, and I found her to be ambitious, and the values that she had, and I could see when she speaks, for example, to other colleagues, the akhlaq she spoke to them with, like the way she would address her elders, like there were people who would work with us in our team who were maybe 20 or 30 years older, how she'd deal with them, how she'd respect, for example, reverts and people who were new to the religion, who were just joining the team. Like that was just a mind-blowing experience to me. And I would observe that without having to be directly involved in that kind of communication. So just to summarize, like social media, a lot of people like just condense it into I'm just bait and TikTok and all of that. But it's a lot more than that. It's unnecessary and necessary interactions. And I know we've talked a lot. Does that help at all?
There was one more question there, I think.
Yeah. Anything else?
Questions?
Or anyone else want to add anything?
There was one more question. So Imam Ali's given us a way to hold ourselves accountable, and that is a reflection every night. And if you guys struggle with reflection, something that I've had to do through even my nursing, I use the Gibbs reflective cycle, so you can search it up, and it really helps you to look at why you do things, how you do things, how you do it the next time, how you can improve, what's the conclusion, So find ways that you're actually, if you haven't reflected before, it's taking you through a process. Eventually, once you've learned the ropes and then you can free flow reflect. You can start reflecting, opening up the Quran, opening up, Sifat Sajadiyah, oh my God. So much to reflect on, Najl Balagha, so much. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes these reflections that we may have actually talk to us. It opens up an opportunity, a space for us to in some ways interact with Allah. Does that make sense? And if we take Allah as our guide, how will we ever go wrong? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I like that. Say it.
That's good. And I'll say, when it comes to values, and I don't want to add to what you said, what you've said is enough, but I genuinely believe that when you're getting to know someone, this is where you're supposed to be having those conversations. Because a lot of people just want to live a fairy tale until the wedding day, and then they live reality once they move in together.
Yes.
So, during that phase, everyone's like acting the best they can, speaking in the best way they can, and, probably showering the other with gifts and whatever happens these days. And as soon as you move in together and you've done your nikah and everything's happened, and you're like, okay, I don't agree with this, no, let's change that, why do you follow this, why do you do that? That should be happening at stage one. That should be happening at the very, very, very start, at the very beginning. Because the moment that happens, and if you don't know how to have conflict resolution, and if you don't know how to control your temper and control your anger and control your tongue and control your mind, you will destroy someone's life just because you don't agree with their values. Yes, sometimes their values are against yours, but ultimately they may not be against Islam's values. I think that should be our main priority. If they're not going against Islam, if they're not going against God, they're not going against the Sunnah of Rasulullah, they ain't going against the teachings of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, there shouldn't be a problem with trying to understand their value rather than shut them down and say you are wrong and you're going to end up in hell. We get that a lot, where we mix our culture and values to be godly when eventually they're not.
It's Khoja values, Arab values. So by the time you do all of that, and you've done, mashallah, so well in yours, right? In your relationship.
I don't know.
Even if you've got different cultures that you've come from, you've still had that understanding as a foundation to your relationship.
Yeah, it's tough. Does that answer your question, sister? Yeah. We're going to move towards wrapping up. Anyone want to add anything else before we wrap up? Yes. That's not a question for me. That's a question for you, sister. So,
just obviously for the sake of the recording as well, what the sister was saying is that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're what we see in girls generally, the body language kind of prescribes what's going to happen within that interaction. And from the boy's side, obviously this is what I'm saying, what the sister's saying, from the boy's side, what the boy says, or it could be sarcasm, or whichever way it's said, is what's prescribing what's going to happen in that interaction as such. Does that make sense? It's the subtleness behind what's actually being directly said. Does that make sense? There's always signs. And so what she's saying is that there needs to be a level of hijab on both sides.
That's very important.
To prevent those subtleties from happening. It's better to, I would say it's better to take a step back and understand the situation you're in. And that's also part of reflection, right? Understand the situation you're in and where it may lead to. What you don't want to do is be on a slippery slope or ice or whatever you want to call it, and a roller coaster ride, and end up somewhere and then think, what the hell? You know, I think we've got to really think about things. And what's difficult right now is that we're in a time where everything's about, we need it now, instant gratification for everything. You know, Amazon, I need it today. I need it in the morning, you know? And as a result, we're never present in the moment. You know, we'll sit on the sofa and where's the TV remote? Straight. Or my phone. Or, you know, you won't even interact with the person next to you. It's like you have to do something. There's an urge, you know? And I think that's where we don't stop to think about what's happening. Why are we doing things? When are we doing things? What is the best way to do stuff? Does that make sense? And is it acceptable or not? We just have to keep that in our mind.
Can I add to that, if you don't mind, and specifically on the point on hijab, which I'm surprised we haven't actually mentioned the word hijab up until this point, but hijab, and just for those who would like more context, hijab is a dual-layered, like double meaning, like word, which of course there's the physical hijab and there's the social hijab, which we obviously talk about a lot colloquially in our communities. The physical being the way we cover ourselves for men and women, the way we, our body language, as mentioned, the way we interact with our words, all being physical. Social hijab can also be, we talked about social media, it can be other things like eye contact and the sort of environments we put ourselves in and the atmospheres we engage in. On a personal level, I think that is a critical prerequisite to determining the sort of person you will end up with or would like to end up with. A lot of the time you'll find that the value of, just by chance, and maybe this is just something I've noticed, but even with a lot of my friends, the importance that a lot of my friends have played on hijab for themselves and their wives have ended up matching. So they've ended up being with a girl who aligns with them on the value of hijab. Just by chance, like just natural correlation of things tend to work out like that. So if you are a brother and you care about hijab, or I don't want to make any judgments, but I'm just going to be very blunt. Like if that's something for you, like Abid mentioned, a core value, like if that's one of your core values, you end up naturally like moving towards a sister who displays that as a core value, either outwardly or inwardly. And I think that would be the same with a brother as well. So if you're a sister and hijab is very important to you, you will not naturally move towards a guy who does not come across as a guy that's one of his core values. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair, and I really liked the word the sister mentioned, hijab, because I think it's a real key word in the conversation. But I think I just want to change that word, not hijab, because I think it's confusing sort of people. I don't think she refers to just like the physical hijab, which she emphasized on. But I think the main word here is modesty. Keep your conversations modest. Keep them humble. Keep them within reason, within the boundaries of Islam. One example I can give is that brothers, when we speak to sisters, sometimes we just want to look directly into their face. So I don't look there now. But lower your gaze. Islam tells you to lower your gaze. Yani, especially if your conversation is within like a very close proximity, there is no point in you just looking straight into her face. And as a brother, someone doing that to your sister, believe me,
it's
not game
over, bro.
Exactly. So we don't want to do that to any of our sisters out there. Whether she is Muslim or not, she can even be non-Muslim. Don't give her, don't give yourself to fall into that approach where you lose your modesty as a man. I don't want to speak on behalf of the female. I'm not a female. I'll speak from a guy's perspective. Just lower your gaze. Wallah, it will save you so much trouble, not just on the day of judgment, but in this world, inshallah.
I think the respect you end up having for your wife after you do get married will like skyrocket.
You know what I find shocking? Because you spoke about now respect and having respect for your wife. I see people who, for example, don't lower their gaze when they have to. When they have these conversations like within close proximity, sometimes not even with a third person present.
After they get married.
Yeah, and it's absolutely normal. And what happens to his wife? She's so hurt because they found it so normal. They didn't see any difference that now they're married. Sometimes they can have children, but they're still doing it whilst they are married with other sisters.
I think that's like we have to be able to channel that desire to be with the opposite gender, which is completely normal. Natural. You mentioned the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it himself. You find enjoyment in women, for men, and children, and money, and this and that. Like it's completely normal. But channeling that desire into something halal at the point where a non-mahram becomes mahram to you and becomes legitimate to you, and trust me, it will change the way you see the world. And something you mentioned, I just really quickly want to mention something you mentioned earlier about the road that you start on at the beginning of your relationship. Let's say at the point of engagement, it doesn't always stay like that. I completely agree, but also you evolve. So, like I got engaged 5 years ago. 5 years later, I have 2 children. Subhanallah. But for me, it's like we adapt and we evolve based on the surroundings and the environments we get into. And you tend to grow with someone and you like get thrown into these life situations. So you'll have family members pass away from your side or their side, your spouse's side. You'll enter like lockdowns and COVIDs together and stuff like that. But you'll get thrown into these weird and like wonderful scenarios that you kind of feel like you're living in an escape room to points. And it's just about survival of the fittest, not literally speaking between you and your wife, but in the sense of like you come out of it as a stronger couple. If the core and the start of that relationship was made with a good niyyah and with a good intention, inshallah. We've talked a lot, guys. I know we've probably bored the life out of you. Any last comments before we wrap up?
We have to do the red flags, though.
Should we do that quickly?
Very quickly. Any questions, though?
Anything before we... Yes, brother over here.
Just had a question. So the purpose of marriage, obviously, is to become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're supposed to help each other get there. Now, given the nature of we're 2 different genders and our tests are slightly different.
A man said the G word, starting the gender conversation. Okay.
Can't open it.
Assuming 2 genders.
One hopes.
Now, the problem is sometimes I can't necessarily relate with some of the struggles that someone of the opposite gender will go through, and she won't be able to relate with what I go through. Do you think more should be done by the community before marriage, so that once we do enter into a marriage, we don't downplay the struggles of the other gender? I see this a lot with men, especially. They really downplay the struggle of hijab. And I had to learn this when I got married. It was something that, I just kind of took it for granted. But I think there isn't really enough conversation happening about it to educate men, especially, this is just my own experience, to tell you, hey, it's a lot more than what you think it is.
That's pure wisdom.
But that beauty of the empathy, I just want to point out, that beauty in the empathy that you have towards your wife, you said your marriage, right? About her struggles with hijab. That's just beautiful, isn't it, within a relationship? To understand the other person, to understand what is difficult for them in life. And in the same way, she will then look out for you in that same way. I mean, I'm just bringing it back to relationships. Yes, there should be a lot more done within the community. And a lot of the time there is, unfortunately, people are not taking it up. Whether it's ego, whether it's, oh my God, it's not done. Everyone's going to just think I'm weird, Or I can't ask my future wife to do that. She's going to think I'm weird, So I think we're our own worst enemies. I'll be honest with you. We are our own worst enemies. If we don't know what we want, we will turn down what's available to us. Does that make sense?
Can I just add as well, just onto that? You said, should more work be done by our communities? 1,000%, bro. You guys are in academic institutions. You're in a place where people are willing and ready to engage in conversations. You will have confrontations, so you will encounter people inside and outside your AbSoc who will disagree with you outright. You will have liberals and you will have conservatives. There in this room will be liberals and conservatives when it comes to the pure topic of gender in itself. But of course there should be. Like, masculinity, if we're talking about men, is more a threat now than it ever has been. And the definition of what it means to be a real man is more a threat now than it ever has been. And that's because the lines are so blurred. So you've got young guys growing up thinking you're a real man if you're carrying a shank, like you're carrying a knife, or you can use like swear words and you listen to hard music, and people's priorities have become completely warped and distorted, and that's prior to marriage. And then the perception of a man post-marriage is even worse in some cases. So yes, I think more should be done. And I to be honest, I think an AbSoc, as an example, youth groups should be leading those conversations. And we have so many really fantastic speakers and scholars within our communities. Obviously, there's got to be nuance. There's got to be intelligence to understand that people will fall on different sides of the ideological spectrum. One person's opinion will completely differ to someone else's. But yeah, there should be, yeah. I have to stress, because we've been hearing a lot about feminism in the last 15 or 20 years, and the topic of masculinity seems to have been a big thing in the last few years, especially. But yeah, I do think it's a threat, and I think more needs to be done. Yeah, for sure. I know we want to wrap up fast. Anything to add, Sayed?
I think you've both said enough on that point. But I do want to mention one thing, and I think maybe we can all find this beneficial, is that when we are trying to find that spouse, there is no perfect spouse.
No. Yes.
They don't exist. I know your wife is here. So I'm not going to speak on your behalf, but no one is perfect. Not me, not my wife, not even my own parents. Everyone has some sort of struggle, and believe me, there will be some sort of conflict. But how you deal with life and how you deal with it makes you who you are. You can either, choose the path that tries to see the better and the best in everyone, or just see death and destruction in everything that you do. There is no point getting married. All you have to do is argue. There are marriages that happen, all you see is arguments. There is nothing else. I'm right, he's wrong. But now, the point I want to bring it to here, and something that I have observed and realized from the surroundings I'm in and environments I involve myself in, is that I believe every couple is influenced, not just by mama, not just by baba, not just by community, but their friends.
Yeah.
If you want to know who you're marrying, know their friends.
Yeah.
Find out who they chill with, find out where they go when they want to have fun, what conversations they talk about, and you will know what sort of spouse you want to have.
True.
And I think that's super an important point to play in a role in a marriage, because once you get married, no one's leaving their friends. I know, the best thing to do is just spending time with each other, but everyone needs that social aspect in their life. Eventually, after a month, maybe 2, you want to see your friends. But when you go out to see your friends, when they come back home, you'll realize, did they change? If there was some change at home, the friends have influence on them, and they will control your marriage eventually. So ensure that when you do get married, you're not just marrying her or her parents, and you're not just marrying his or his parents, you're marrying their friends as well.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Hopefully you guys found that somewhat beneficial. Last point from brother here? Yeah.
Sorry, it's just a question that I feel like could lead into the red flags conversation you wanted to have. I mean, you mentioned friends being an influence. How about in-laws or parents, let's say? I just want to get your thoughts on to what extent you feel like parents can influence.
It's a really good question. So, Islamically speaking, like every husband and wife will go through this phase of understanding about my parents and my in-laws. So, especially in the early stage of your engagement. Are you engaged or married, brother, if you don't mind me asking? Are you married? No. Okay. So, when you get married, and everyone who's been married will probably testify to this, there is a phase which you will go through where you try your hardest to understand to what extent should parents of my spouse or my own parents be involved, and to which degree. So that's natural. Islamically speaking, your spouse has no fiqhi obligations to your parents. So a husband has no fiqhi obligations to the wife's parents and vice versa. But obviously there's a moral and like a relationship-based expectation that, for example, God forbid, if my parents were unwell, I would hope me and my wife would take care of my parents, and if vice versa, her family. And do you see what I mean? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, a lot of people talk about the wife versus the mother dilemma, which is a big thing. Do I prefer my wife, or do I say yes to my wife or to my mother? One cooks me food and the other cooks me food. Who do I say is better? I heard this actually by Mufti Menk, who mentioned this example. He actually said something really cool, which I like. He said, it's not this one or that one. He goes, it's neither of them, because your responsibility as a husband, at least, is different to both of them. So you have responsibility as a son, for example, and your responsibilities as a son will differ to your responsibilities as a husband. Beyond that as well, your job, for example, as a man in that dynamic is to go wherever the side of haqq is. So if you know haqq is with, and I'm not talking about dispute even, but just in general. So wherever haqq is, you want to take you and your family with them. By your family, that means your wife, your children, your parents, your sibling, whoever that is. Your immediate priorities are your immediate family. And Islamically speaking, your immediate family is your parents, your spouse, and your children. Like as far as I understand, in terms of fiqh.
So they're right, yeah.
Yeah, anything to add?
Can I just add, I think if you're talking about in terms of a possible level of interference or too much interaction that is having an impact on your relationship, if you had done the groundwork that we're talking about early on and you've understood each other, you would both understand where there's interference in your relationship because you've built that core foundation. Does that make sense?
Do you think some people may not know about their own families or the baggage that comes with their family until they are exposed to it from the outside, or until they see? I have friends, for example, who became shocked by their own parents after they became married, or for example, who would have jeopardy with their own family based on relationships post-marriage. Do you see what I mean?
But this is where conversations don't just happen just with the partner, but they also happen with
That's very important,
the family. Marriage is not just between two a couple. Marriage is the whole family getting together, and these conversations have to happen with your parents. You need to say that, you want me to get married, that's fine, but these are the kind of things as a family we need to work through so that we all know where we stand. It's so simple. Why not get both the families around the table with you as a couple and have a discussion and get them to be together? Mm-hmm. In our traditional marriages, you kind of meet each other properly, on the wedding day, and there's so much expectation. But again, we need to set the scene. We need to be active well beforehand. So I hope that's helpful.
If I could just add something, just one last thing, sorry, because I know we're dragging. But you do not listen. You do not need to listen to everything your parents say. I don't want to say this in the wrong way. Your parents are like the closest thing, hadith-wise. We don't need to go. The status, the martaba your parents have is like God-given status. May Allah bless them. Until you become a parent, you won't clock it. But if your parents or your spouse's parents are saying, we don't do things this way, the wife doesn't need to wear full hijab on nikah. She can wear dupatta, for example, like a halfway hair showing. Or, for example, no, it's okay, we'll play music at the reception, it's not a big deal. Like, in cases like that, you're allowed to say, I'm sorry, we're not doing that. Because if it breaks, obviously, God's law, you're allowed to say no. Mm-hmm. But kind of going a bit further than that, it's really important to have a conversation around culture as well, because culturally, parents, even if it's not a question of halal or haram, but culturally, parents will expect something, and it may be completely different to the expectation of your spouse. So to speak, for example, in our culture, you might, in my culture, the girls in our culture might wear a certain color on a certain wedding event, but you might marry a girl from another culture, or the girl you're marrying may not want to do things that way. In my culture, you have, there's a cultural mahar, for example. There's a number which is culturally given as a mahar. Like, so, you know, you have elders in the community who would have got married many years ago who say, no, culturally, we do things this way, she should accept it. Like, things don't really work like that anymore. So you're allowed to have those conversations. I think you'll discover a big part of your manlyhood when you get to that point, because you engage in conversations which are otherwise frightening to have. And I'm not saying you're daring to the point of obscenity or like rebelliousness, but you're becoming courageous and you're understanding what your rights are Islamically, but you're also again navigating the relationship with your parents at the same time as your potential spouse.
And it's better to have that before than in a situation
100%.
Where it is heated and you're going to damage the relationships. You know.
Can I share something personal here?
Go on.
Yeah. During my engagement period, when we were engaged, I think just was like 1 year, 1 month, and then we actually done the nikah and got married. So since our engagement period, we would have these discussions, you know, how do we see life, or what we expect from each other and things like that. And then I'm not going to say there was conflict, but I'll say there were differences of opinion, between, for example, myself, my wife, or for example, my own family. And so we'll have these conversations. Nothing ever got out of hand, alhamdulillah. But then I remember I was like, imagine one day, Mama will disagree with my wife. What do I do then? So I did one thing straight away during that period. I went to my wife and I was like, look, never put me in a situation between you and my mom. I said that to her straight out. She's like, what are you talking about? I was like, look, if my family ever say something, I want you to acknowledge what they said, respect their opinion and difference, and if you have a difference of opinion, share with me later at home of why you think you should be different. Yeah. I told my family, believe it or not, I was like, never. I was like, look, I respect you for everything, especially my mom. I hold her to the highest of regards. But I was like, I would never want to expect you to be involved in my life. I want you to encourage, advise, share your concerns, but never be directly involved. Never say do that. Rather say, I think maybe this might be better. The way we do that communication, so the way the communication is so key to these things when it comes to, for example, navigating between your in-laws, your own spouses, or even your own siblings may disagree. We think just in-laws and moms and mother-in-laws, father-in-laws and daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws. No, even siblings can have disagreements, believe it or not. Yeah,
mashallah, I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah, he smashed it.
Yeah,
beautiful.
alhamdulillah.
He's mashallah, he knows what he's talking about. That's why you got to subscribe to After Maghrib. All right, guys, are we good? I think we've pretty much wrapped up. Just one or two last things before I wrap up from my end, if you don't mind. Thank you to Abid and to the team at Warwick AbSoc for having us, and especially a massive thanks to Sister Farzana, who is mashallah a pioneer in our community for all of us, and who's doing incredible work. She's doing a lot right now in the current situation. We want to do more with you, inshallah, in terms of After Maghrib. And I'm sure we all want to thank her. So please join me in reciting salawat fa sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And just the last thing from me, please guys, if you haven't already, please open up YouTube, scan the barcode, subscribe to After Maghrib. We are trying to do a lot more. We want to do a lot more in 2024. We want to do a lot more content specifically for sisters, because we are a team of 4 or 5 guys. 4 of us are here today. But we need ideas, we need support. So subscribe to us, follow us on Instagram, TikTok. If you want us to get involved, let us know. We're all ears and we're happy to help.